I just got back from Barnes and Nobles, and I was reading for about an hour a book which came out in 2023. It was published in 2023 by Norton, called "I've Been Thinking" by Daniel Dennett. And if you don't know who Daniel Dennett is, he's a very famous, well-known philosopher. He's done a lot of work in cognitive science. He's very much committed to an evolutionary Darwinian scheme. He wrote a book called Why Darwin Matters. And so he's a diehard, radical, committed Darwinist in just, and he uses natural selection basically to explain just about everything in life. He has a section on chapter 34 was one of my favorite chapters. I looked at a few chapters of the book. That was a very interesting chapter. It deals with what he calls bullies in the intellectual world, and so that was interesting to find out who the bullies are. Who are these bullies? Stephen Jay Gould. Dennett considers Gould a bully, and also somebody who distorts what other people say about evolution. I personally love reading Stephen Jay Gould much more than Dennett. So some of my, but anyway, so he doesn't like Gould. He doesn't like John Searle, who's also a major analytic philosopher. Dennett, the person he does like is Douglas Hofstadter. He likes Douglas Hofstadter a lot. I also like Hofstadter. I personally am not a great fan of Daniel Dennett. I do enjoy reading him when I do read him, and I do learn some stuff from him. He's very intelligent. I personally am not attracted to his philosophy at all. But if you are interested in modern philosophy and you're aware, for example, of Quine, of John Searle, of Stephen Jay Gould, if you're aware of these people, Douglas Hofstadter, David Chalmers, Jerry Fodor, these are some of the people he talks about, Marvin Minsky, Gilbert Ryle. If these people are familiar to you, you will enjoy the book, because his book basically, it's kind of like a name call. It's kind of like an introduction to a lot of the main philosophers that he's encountered in his life, and he tells interesting stories about them. He tells one interesting story where he was one of four speakers at the University of Santa Clara in honor of John Searle. The three speakers came up, and they all basically talked about their own books, and they didn't much about Searle. But since Dennett, he says, "Well, if I'm called to talk about somebody, I'll talk about him." So he proceeded to talk about Searle and to criticize Searle. And Searle was there, and Searle got very, very angry about that, and his wife Dagmar. They were very angry. They were very offended. So that's chapter 34. That was an interesting one. And then he talks about his disagreements with Stephen Jay Gould, and he doesn't have much good stuff to say about Gould. I mean, except he acknowledges, of course, that Gould is a brilliant thinker. There's no doubt about that. But he thinks that Gould he considers him one of the bullies, and he also distorts what other people say about evolution if they disagree with him. So anyway, it's called "I've Been Thinking." It was published in 2023 by Daniel Dennett. It's a little under 400 pages. It's $38, so it's a very expensive book. It begins on October 24th, 2006, when he was rushed to an emergency room from his office at Tufts University where he was teaching, and he was rushed into the emergency room because, as he says, his aorta, inner and outer layers of his aorta, uh, came apart, and he was in danger of bleeding to death. So that's how the book begins, and he's thankful that he survived, and he thanks all the nurses and doctors and all the people that helped him. He says he thank goodness he survived. He's grateful for that. But as the atheist he is, he says, I can't say thank God because I don't believe in God. So basically, Dennett always has he has an agenda to push. For some reason, he feels a need to constantly let you know that he's an atheist. Okay, that's fine. I get tired of atheists that constantly tell you about their atheism. To me, they're just kind of the opposite of fundamentalists who have to tell you about Christianity all the time. But anyway, so that's Dennett, and then he has to end his book by again talking about the creation, or the Discovery Institute, which is a Christian organization. So his atheism comes up every now and then in the book. He's a good writer. I mean, it's an interesting book. It's an interesting book to spend a few hours with. He doesn't like Heidegger. He says, he never read Heidegger. I'm sure he's glanced at Heidegger. He says he lets he'll read what Richard Rorty has to say about Heidegger. He says Rorty gets about 70% of it right. So he said, that's a good deal. Instead of reading Heidegger, I'll just see what Richard Rorty says about him, and I'll get a good idea what Heidegger is saying. Anyway, I just recommend the book to you if you want to spend a couple hours in enjoyable reading. It's a good book, especially if you're interested in modern philosophy and you keep up with some of the debates going on in the intellectual world, dealing with evolution, cognitive science, debates on free will. So, it's kind of a tour. It kind of offers you a guided tour through some of the. You'll encounter many of the very well-known figures. And so that's kind of enjoyable. I don't remember. Well, yeah, Chomsky comes up. He mentions Chomsky a lot. He mentions Douglas Hofstadter. He mentions him. I think he has a whole chapter on Douglas Hofstadter. So if you want an interesting book to look at, I suggest that you look at it. It's called I've Been Thinking, and it's by Daniel Dennett. And I will leave it at that. That was what I discovered today at Barnes & Noble's. That's usually what I do when I go to Barnes & Noble's. I just kind of find a book that looks interesting that I haven't read yet, browse through it. That's what I do with Daniel Dennett's book. I probably won't ever go back and look at it again, but I did have about an hour and a half enjoyment reading it. So, that's my book review for Daniel Dennett. And now I gotta stop this.